COLA appealed to me because I would have a home life. Living in the school home in those years, now that I look back on it, was really a real good experience. We had an opportunity to have regular meals, we had a regular bedtime, and there was somebody there that we could depend on. Although none of the house mothers that they had when I was at the organic school appealed to me or were able to gain much of my confidence or interest. My heart lay with the horses, and as soon as the classes were over, I was gone until the required time to be in at the school home. And there were always complaints. The previous school I had been in, there was no opportunity to complain. It was very, very strict and very regimented, and nobody said anything. But here, everybody complained, and especially the high school students and the junior high school students. And so I joined in with them, and I felt like the school home was really kind of a bad deal, and we had to wash dishes at night after supper. And I wanted to be freer, and I wanted to spend more time at Blanche Brown's. So I asked my dad, couldn't I just go live with her rather than moving to Pensacola? But he told me no, I couldn't do that, but that he would keep the horses for me and he would board them at a stable. So I left. Well, it didn't take me long back in the public school system to find out how wonderful the organic school was and what a good education I was getting. I went right into what was then called the high school preparatory course in 10th grade, and I had no problems with any classes. I left organic, and I went in with the college preparatory classes. I did well, I made good grades. I was a little above average as far as the grades I was able to make, with the exception of algebra. I didn't do very well in algebra at all. In fact, when I finished algebra, the teacher said that I should not take second year algebra. However, I went to a different school the next year, and they didn't know about it, and I took geometry, I guess, the next year, and did very well in geometry. And then when I had second year algebra, it was a snap for me. But the 2 years that I spent in Pensacola, I really spent trying to get back to the organic school.
You talk about preparation. In 1941, I was sent to Panama. I landed in Panama on a Tuesday and was taken out to the base camp, and Thursday morning I was in the field with 14 Panamanians as the party chief, lead surveyor, and every one of them knew just as much English as I did Spanish. But I had, it seems to me, like 4 years of Latin. I know I had 2 years of Latin. And I did that, complaining and bellyaching and carrying on about the uselessness of studying a dead language. Well, went in the field on Thursday morning, and by Thursday evening we were effectively communicating with each other. And within a week or 10 days, I was speaking enough Spanish to get along well with them, and realized that my Latin had given me a groundwork that made it possible for me to pick up this new language, Spanish. And by the time I left, I spoke Spanish, not Spanish, I spoke Panamanian fluently. There's a significant difference I've discovered between the Spanish that's spoken in Mexico and the Spanish that's spoken in Panama, and I imagine the Spanish that's spoken in Spain. Would you like for us to stop?
You're going to have to. I have a telephone call. I have to
be somewhere in about 10.
All right. When I finally was able to come back to the organic school after the 2 years of working diligently to be able to come back and graduate, I had learned a great deal about appreciation for what we had here. And it was far from perfect. And the kids that had been here all along and whose parents had been to the organic school, like Jeff Kane and Paul Arnold, talked a lot about, oh, how terrible the school was, and it should be run by the book. And I kept saying, well, what book? Because I felt like the school was wonderful, and if it could be better, I wanted to know about it. And this was sort of a mystery book the whole time I was in high school. And when I graduated, I went on and worked in Birmingham for a couple of years. And I found out I wanted to come back to Fairhope rather than moving to Washington, D.C. area and work. And I wanted to come back because of all of my 20 years, the happiest I had been was the 3 years I had spent in Fairhope. And I did a great deal of traveling in the 2.5 years I was gone after graduation. And the only thing different about Fairhope that I could think of was the organic school and the single tax corporation. And yet that was where I had been the happiest. So I came back to find out and do as much as I could for those two organizations. It stayed in my memory
The book.
that what the organic school needed was to be run by the book. And the thing was, the book had never been published. Mrs. Johnson had a manuscript that she was preparing for publication when she passed on, and there were just a few copies of it around. And I thought, if we just had the book, if the teachers and the administrators could read the book, that would solve all of the problems, and the organic school could be like it was when Mrs. Johnson was here. So that really was a goal that I set when I moved back to Fairhope. I had no job, I had no money, I had a horse, but completely confident that I could make a living somehow and support myself and the horse and the dog, and I was going to find a way to get that book published so that it would be available for people at the organic school. And it took about 10 years from the time that I came back to Fairhope to finally get the book published. Claude and I married about 8 years after. And I guess it took about 12 years because I think our oldest boy was about 4 when we started to work on really getting the book published. And I sought copies of this manuscript, and I found out that the board was going to appropriate funds to have the book published. And I then sought people to publish the book, and the University of Press agreed that they were working on historical books related to Alabama, and this would be a wonderful opportunity for them to publish 30 Years with an Idea. So I persuaded Dot Kane to lend me her copy of the manuscript so that I could persuade the University of Alabama, so I could provide it to the University of Alabama Press. And from her unedited copy, then the copies now that we have of 30 Years with an Idea were published.
I want to just insert on that particular thing. That manuscript was found after Meredith Johnson's death in the attic by Kenneth, and he brought it home very excited. We did not even know she was writing that book. Now, her first book that we should speak of in this is Youth and World of Men, and that was published in 1929, and it's a very excellent book.
Right.
Out of print now. When Ken brought that manuscript home, I took it to the Eastern Shore Courier. The editor was Frances Gaston Crawford, and asked her if she would give me 500 copies of that manuscript. And she said, no, but I'll give you 50. And she's the one that put it into the newsprint. And I explained to her how we had found it. So when it was finished, she brought it, or told me she had it ready, and I said, I'll come down and get them. She said, no, you can't have them, because in your enthusiasm, you will pass them out promiscuously, and I probably would have. But that I brought from the Eastern Shore Courier is in the case there, and I made the cover for it out of leather. Then since then, 2 other manuscripts of the same book have been found that the Fredericks boys had. Dr. Pierce Frederick brought them recently to the museum. We're not even sure whether they were earlier manuscripts or the one that Ken found. And then Jeffrey became very ill, and you people lovingly took over, because I couldn't pursue it at that time. Jeff was 7, and that's when you picked it up. Well, that's fine, but I have an appointment